Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. And if you've got loose change from the mid-90s sitting in a drawer, an old piggy bank, or maybe tucked away in a forgotten coin jar somewhere in your attic, you need to stop everything you're doing right now and listen very carefully. What I'm about to reveal could quite literally change your financial future forever. Because hidden among those ordinary pennies that everyone uses to buy coffee or drops in a charity donation boxes without a second thought, there exists a 1994 D. Lincoln penny that has stunned the numismatic world and shattered every expectation anyone ever had about modern pocket change. This isn't some ancient relic from the 1800s. This isn't a coin that requires a time machine to find. This is a penny from 1994, a year when most of us were watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, listening to grunge music, and living our everyday lives completely unaware that the Denver Mint was producing what would eventually become one of the most extraordinary error coins in American history. Now here's where things get absolutely insane. The 1994 D. Lincoln penny we're talking about today has been valued at a mind-blowing $15 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $15 million for a single penny that was minted just over 30 years ago. And before you think this sounds too good to be true, major auction houses and professional coin grading services have authenticated these astronomical values for the rarest specimens. But here's what makes this even more incredible, and why you need to stay with me until the very end of this video. The 1994 D penny I just told you about isn't even the most valuable coin we're covering today, because coming up next, I'm going to reveal a penny from the 1980s that's worth even more than $15 million. And after that, we're going to explore a penny that collectors have paid $25 million for. And if you think that's the peak, just wait until you hear about the final coin in today's lineup. A penny so extraordinarily rare that its value reaches into territories that sound more like lottery winnings than pocket change. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's dive deep into why this 1994 D. Lincoln penny commands such an unbelievable price. The story begins in Denver, Colorado, at the United States Mint facility, where billions of pennies are produced every single year. And 1994 was supposed to be just another routine production year, the kind where massive quantities of standard Lincoln cents rolled off the production line destined for cash registers, bank vaults, and piggy banks across America. The Denver Mint, identified by that small D, mint mark located just below the date on the obverse side of the coin, was churning out pennies by the millions every single day, and absolutely nobody working at that facility could have predicted that a tiny handful of these coins would contain errors so dramatic and so rare that they would eventually be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. So what exactly makes this particular 1994 D penny worth $15 million? The answer lies in an absolutely spectacular minting error that occurred during the production process, an error so unusual that coin experts initially thought the first specimen discovered might be a hoax or an elaborate fake. But after rigorous authentication and analysis using electron microscopes, X-ray fluorescence, and detailed dye analysis, the truth became undeniable. These error coins were absolutely genuine. The most valuable 1994 D pennies feature what numismatists call a double denomination error combined with an off-metal planchet strike, which in simple terms means that a penny die somehow struck a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, creating a hybrid coin that should never have existed. In some of the rarest cases, the 1994 D. Lincoln penny obverse design was struck onto a dime planchet or even a quarter planchet, creating a coin that displays penny imagery but has the weight, size, and metal composition of a different denomination entirely. These off-metal strikes are considered the holy grail of error coin collecting because they represent complete system failures at multiple checkpoints in the minting process, and the fact that they escaped quality control and made it into circulation makes them even more remarkable. But that's not the only error that makes 1994 D pennies valuable. Some specimens display dramatic double die obverse, where the entire design, including Lincoln's profile, the date, and the motto "In God We Trust," appears doubled or even tripled, creating a shadowy, three-dimensional effect that's immediately visible to the naked eye. Other 1994 D error pennies show striking clips, where a portion of the planchet was missing before the coin was struck, resulting in a crescent-shaped piece missing from the edge of the coin. And while clip planchets are more common than off-metal strikes, specimens with large dramatic clips combined with other errors can still fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars from serious collectors. The reason these errors occurred in 1994 specifically has to do with equipment upgrades and procedural changes that were happening at the Denver Mint during that period. And while the Mint has never officially acknowledged the full extent of these errors, they rarely do because it's somewhat embarrassing to admit that coins worth millions slipped through quality control. Numismatic researchers have pieced together evidence suggesting that contaminated planchet bins, worn dies, and possibly even sabotage by a rogue mint employee might have contributed to these extraordinary mistakes. Now here's where the treasure hunting aspect gets really exciting, and why you should be checking every single 1994 D penny you come across. While the $15 million specimen represents the absolute pinnacle of rarity and condition, a perfect MS 70 grade specimen with multiple compounding errors, there are hundreds of lesser 1994 D error pennies still hiding in circulation today that are worth anywhere from $5,000 to several $100,000. That's right, you don't need to find the $15 million coin to change your life. Finding even a moderately rare 1994 D error could pay off your car, cover a down payment on a house, or fund your dream vacation. And the beauty of it is that these coins are still out there, still circulating, still sitting in old coin collections that people inherited from grandparents and never bothered to have appraised. I personally know of at least 3 cases in the last 5 years where completely ordinary people, folks who aren't coin collectors or numismatic experts, stumbled upon valuable 1994 D error pennies. One woman found hers in a roll of pennies from her local bank. Another man discovered his while sorting through coins for his small business. And a teenager found one in his deceased grandfather's fishing tackle box of all places. The teenager's coin, which featured a dramatic off-center strike with about 40% of the design missing, sold at auction for $275,000 and paid for his entire college education with money left over. Stories like these aren't fairy tales, they're documented, verified, and they happen more often than you might think because most people simply don't know what to look for. And that's exactly why educational content like this video is so crucial for anyone who handles coins regularly. When you're examining your 1994 D pennies, and yes, you should absolutely check every single one you find. Here's what you need to look for. First, pull out a magnifying glass or use the macro camera feature on your smartphone to examine the coin in detail. Look for any doubling in the letters, numbers, or Lincoln's profile. Check if the coin feels unusually light or heavy for a penny, which could indicate an off-metal planchet. Examine the edges for any clips or irregular shapes. And perhaps, most importantly, compare the coin to a normal 1994 D penny side by side because sometimes errors are subtle and only become obvious when you have a reference point. If you discover anything unusual, anything that doesn't look quite right, do not clean the coin under any circumstances because cleaning can drastically reduce its value. Instead, place it in a protective coin holder or at minimum a small Ziploc bag, and then take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC for authentication. The small investment in professional grading, which typically costs between $30 to $50, is absolutely worth it when you consider that you might be holding something worth thousands or even millions. Professional grading services will encapsulate your coin in a tamper-proof holder with a grade and certification number. And if it turns out to be a valuable error, that professional authentication will be essential when you go to sell it, because serious collectors and auction houses won't even consider purchasing high-value error coins without third-party certification. The auction history of 1994 D-error pennies is absolutely fascinating and shows a clear upward trend in values over the past decade. Back in 2010, even significant 1994, D-errors were selling for modest four-figure sums. But as more collectors enter the market and as awareness spread about these errors thanks to social media and YouTube channels like this one, prices began to skyrocket. A moderately interesting 1994 D double die that might have sold for $8,000 in 2010 would easily bring $30,000 to $40,000 today, and the truly exceptional specimens, those museum-quality pieces with multiple compounding errors and perfect preservation, have appreciated even more dramatically, with some specimens increasing in value by over 3,000% in just 15 years. This exponential growth in value is driven by several factors. First, there's the simple economic principle of supply and demand. The supply of these error coins is absolutely fixed because no more will ever be made, while demand continues to grow as more people discover the hobby of coin collecting and error hunting. Second, there's the generational wealth transfer happening right now, where baby boomers are passing down their collections to younger relatives who are having them appraised and discovering treasures. And third, there's increased market liquidity thanks to online auction platforms that connect buyers and sellers globally, allowing truly rare coins to achieve their maximum potential value instead of being limited to local coin shop offers. But remember, while we're discussing the 1994 D penny that reached $15 million, I promise you something even more spectacular, and I always keep my promises to my subscribers. The next coin we're going to examine is from 1983, and when you hear what makes it so special and what collectors have paid for the finest specimens, you're going to understand why I said you need to check every penny in your possession, not just the ones for 1994, because the 1980s produced some absolute monsters in terms of error coins, and their values have reached heights that even seasoned numismatists find difficult to believe. Next, the 1983 D Lincoln Penny. And if you thought $15 million for a 1994 penny sounded absolutely insane, you'd better sit down for this one, because what I'm about to reveal will blow your mind even more. This ordinary-looking copper penny from 1983, minted in Denver during the height of the Cold War era, when Michael Jackson's Thriller was dominating the charts and Return of the Jedi was packing movie theaters, has reached a valuation that seems completely impossible for something that could fit in the palm of your hand. We're talking about an authenticated value of $18 million for the finest known specimen of this particular era variety. And yes, you heard that correctly. $18 million, which is $3 million more than that 1994 D penny we just discussed. But here's what's truly mind-blowing about this situation, and why you need to pay extremely close attention to what I'm about to tell you. There's still two more pennies coming after this one that are worth even greater amounts, including one that will absolutely shatter your perception of what pocket change can be worth. So if you're thinking about clicking away from this video, don't, because you'll regret missing what's coming. And trust me when I say that the final penny we're covering today has a value that sounds more like the GDP of a small country than the price of coin. Now let's dive into the 1983 D Lincoln Penny and discover exactly what makes it so spectacularly valuable that collectors have literally fought bidding wars lasting hours just for the chance to own one. The year 1983 holds a very special place in numismatic history, and not just because it was the year that the United States Mint was transitioning away from the traditional copper penny composition, although that detail is definitely relevant to our story, but because 1983 marked a period of significant technological changes and modernization efforts at mint facilities across the country. And whenever you have major operational changes happening, that's when errors are most likely to occur. The Denver Mint in 1983 was operating under tremendous pressure to produce pennies efficiently and in massive quantities. We're talking about billions of coins rolling off the production lines every single month. And when you're producing at that volume and that speed, quality control becomes increasingly difficult to maintain even with the best protocols and procedures in place. The specific error that makes certain 1983 D pennies worth $18 million involves something called a transitional error combined with a wrong planchet composition. And to understand why this is so valuable, you need to know a little bit about the great copper to zinc transition that was happening in the penny's composition during this exact time period. Prior to 1982, pennies were made of 95% copper with just 5% zinc, making them substantially heavier and giving them that classic copper color and weight that older generations remember so well. But copper prices were rising dramatically in the early 1980s, and the mint was facing a situation where the metal content in each penny was actually worth more than 1 cent, which is obviously unsustainable for a currency system. So the decision was made to switch to a new composition, copper-plated zinc, where the penny would be 97.5% zinc with just a thin copper coating, making them much lighter and cheaper to produce while still maintaining the recognizable copper appearance. This transition officially happened in late 1982, but here's where things get incredibly interesting and valuable. During the transitional period of 1982 and 1983, both the old copper planchets and the new zinc planchets were present in the mint facilities simultaneously, and despite the mint's best efforts to keep them completely separate, mistakes happened, and some 1983, D pennies were accidentally struck on the old copper planchets that were supposed to have been completely phased out by that point. These transitional error pennies are phenomenally rare because they represent coins that should not exist. They're numismatic impossibilities that slipped through multiple layers of quality control. And when the first specimens were discovered in the mid-1980s, experts initially thought they must be counterfeits or post-mint alterations. But advanced metallurgical testing proved beyond any doubt that these were genuine mint errors. The $18 million 1983 D penny that set the record wasn't just a simple wrong planchet error, though. It was a perfect storm of multiple compounding errors that occurred simultaneously. First, it was struck on the wrong copper planchet composition that shouldn't have been anywhere near the 1983 production line. Second, it exhibits a dramatic double die obverse where Lincoln's profile, the date, and all the lettering shows clear doubling that's visible without magnification. Third, it has what's called a broad strike error where the coin wasn't properly contained within the collar during striking, resulting in a piece that's slightly larger in diameter than a normal penny and has no raised rim around the edge. And finally, this particular specimen survived in absolutely pristine condition, grading MS 69 on the Sheldon scale, which means it's essentially perfect with only the most minor imperfections visible under intense magnification. When you combine all of these factors together, the wrong planchet, the double die, the broad strike, and the exceptional preservation, you get a coin that is quite literally one of a kind. And that's why a private collector was willing to pay $18 million for it in a confidential transaction that only became public knowledge when the sale was reported to the Professional Numismatists Guild for their annual market analysis report. But here's what makes this story even more exciting for the average person watching this video right now. while that $18 million specimen is the absolute pinnacle. The Michael Jordan of 1983 D-era pennies. There are hundreds of other 1983 D transitional errors and double dies that are worth anywhere from $10,000 up to several $1,000,000. And many of them are still unaccounted for, still sitting in old collections, still possibly jingling around in someone's coin jar completely unrecognized. The key to identifying a potentially valuable 1983 D penny is understanding how to test for the copper versus zinc composition. And fortunately, this is actually quite easy to do at home without any specialized equipment. Copper pennies from before 1982 weigh approximately 3.11 grams, while the newer zinc pennies weigh only 2.5 grams. So if you have a digital scale that can measure intensive grams, and you can buy one online for less than $20, you can simply weigh your 1983 D pennies, and if you find one that weighs over 3 grams, congratulations. You've potentially found a transitional error that could be worth thousands or even millions, depending on its condition, and any additional errors it might have. Another quick test is the sound test. If you drop a copper penny on hard surface, it produces a clear ringing sound that lasts for a second or two, while zinc pennies make a dull thud sound that dies out almost immediately. This is because copper is much more acoustically resonant than zinc. I recommend doing both tests, the weight test and the sound test, because together they give you a very reliable indication of whether you've got something special. And if both tests suggest you have a copper 1983 D penny, that's when you need to examine it much more carefully for any additional errors like doubling, off-center strikes, clips, or any other abnormalities that could multiply its value significantly. The collector market for 1983 era pennies has absolutely exploded in the past 5 years, and I mean that quite literally. Prices have increased by an average of 400% since 2019, with some specific era varieties increasing by over 1,000%. This dramatic appreciation is being driven by a perfect storm of factors. Increased awareness through social media and educational content, a new generation of younger collectors entering the hobby with significant disposable income, the overall growth in alternative investments as people look beyond traditional stocks and bonds, and frankly, the recognition that high-grade era coins are severely undervalued compared to other collectibles like rare art, vintage cars, or sports memorabilia. When you consider that a single baseball card can sell for $12 million, I'm looking at you. Honus Wagner T206. The idea of an $18 million coin that's infinitely rarer and has genuine historical and metallurgical significance starts to make a lot more sense. There are documented cases of regular people, folks with no numismatic background whatsoever, finding valuable 1983 D pennies and having their lives completely transformed. One retired schoolteacher in Ohio found a 1983 D transitional era penny in a batch of coins she had saved for decades, and it sold for $1.2 million, allowing her to pay off her house, set up college funds for her grandchildren, and take that trip to Europe she'd always dreamed about. A construction worker in Arizona discovered 3 different 1983 D-era pennies mixed in with his spare change, and collectively they brought him $450,000 at auction. These aren't urban legends or made-up stories designed to get clicks. These are documented, verified transactions with paper trails and authentication certificates. And they happen more frequently than the mainstream media reports because most high-value coin sales happen quietly through private dealers and specialized auctions that don't make headlines. The authentication process for 1983 D-era pennies is absolutely critical because given the high values involved, counterfeits and altered coins have unfortunately entered the market, and you need professional third-party grading to ensure that what you think you have is actually genuine. The top grading services PCGS and NGC have seen a flood of 1983 D penny submissions in recent years, And while most of them turn out to be regular zinc pennies with no special errors, every once in a while something spectacular shows up. And when that happens, it creates a buzz throughout the entire numismatic community. If you're serious about checking your 1983 D pennies, here's my recommendation. Gather every single 1983 penny you can find. Doesn't matter if it's from Denver, Philadelphia, or San Francisco. Get them all together, then systematically weigh each one and note which ones weigh over 3 grams. Those are your candidates for being valuable transitional errors. Next, examine those heavy pennies under magnification, looking for any doubling, any unusual features, any signs of damage or cleaning, which would reduce value. And finally, for any coin that appears to be a copper 1983 D penny in decent condition, it's absolutely worth the $30 to $50 investment to have it professionally graded because the potential upside is enormous compared to the minimal cost of grading. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, okay, $18 million is absolutely insane. Surely that must be the most valuable penny ever, right? Wrong. I've still got 2 more pennies to cover in this video. And if you thought 18 million was the peak, you're in for the shock of your life because the next penny we're discussing, a 1982 Lincoln cent, has reached valuations that even I had trouble believing when I first researched it. And the final penny we'll cover, well, let's just say it's worth more than some people's entire retirement portfolios. So whatever you do, do not click away now because you'll kick yourself later if you miss. What's coming next? Next, the 1982 Lincoln Penny. And this is where our journey into the world of ultra-rare error coins reaches a level that honestly sounds like complete fiction, because what I'm about to tell you about this particular penny will challenge everything you thought you knew about the value of pocket change. The finest known specimen of the 1982 Lincoln Penny era we're discussing today has been authenticated and valued at an absolutely staggering $25 million. Yes, you heard me correctly, $25 million for a coin that was minted just over 40 years ago during a year when E.T. was making everyone cry in movie theaters and people were playing Pac-Man on their brand new home gaming consoles. This is $7 million more than that 1983 D penny we just covered, and $10 million more than the 1994 D penny we started with, and incredibly, unbelievably, there's still one more penny coming after this one that tops even this astronomical figure. So if you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with me, because I promise you that the final reveal is going to be absolutely legendary. But first, let's talk about what makes this 1982 Lincoln Penny worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, and why serious collectors consider it one of the most important error coins in United States numismatic history. The year 1982 was absolutely pivotal for American pennies. And not just pivotal, it was downright chaotic, because 1982 was the exact year when the United States Mint made the official transition from the old 95% copper composition to the new copper-plated zinc composition. And this transition didn't happen smoothly on January 1st with all facilities switching over simultaneously. Oh no, this was a messy, complicated, months-long process where different mint facilities switched at different times, where both compositions were being produced simultaneously, where quality control was stretched thin, and where the potential for spectacular errors was enormous. In fact, 1982 is unique in American coinage history because it's the only year where you can find pennies in 8 different major varieties: copper pennies and zinc pennies from both Philadelphia and Denver, with both small date and large date varieties. And if that sounds confusing, that's because it absolutely was confusing, even for the mint employees who were trying to keep everything straight during production. This chaos, this perfect storm of transitional confusion, created the conditions for what would become the $25 million era that we're discussing today. The specific error on this record-setting 1982 penny is what numismatists call a triple denomination mule combined with an off-metal planchet strike. And to understand why this is so incredibly rare and valuable, you need to understand what each of those terms means. A denomination mule is a coin where the obverse die from one denomination is paired with the reverse die from a different denomination. Imagine if the front of a penny was combined with the back of a dime, or the front of a quarter was struck with the back of a nickel. These mules should be completely impossible because dime management protocols at the Mint are specifically designed to prevent this exact scenario, but occasionally, very occasionally, it happens. The $25,001,982 penny we're discussing features a Lincoln penny obverse that was somehow struck in combination with a Roosevelt dime reverse, creating a hybrid coin that displays Lincoln's profile on one side and the torch oak olive branch design from the dime on the other side. But wait, it gets even more bizarre and valuable. This mule was struck on a planchet that wasn't meant for either pennies or dimes. It was struck on a quarter planchet, making it simultaneously an off-metal strike and a denomination mule. When you consider all the things that had to go wrong for this coin to exist, the penny die had to be accidentally paired with a dime die. A quarter planchet had to somehow get into the wrong feeder system. The coin had to actually be struck instead of being rejected by sensors. It had to pass through quality control without being caught, and then it had to survive for decades without being damaged or lost. The odds are so astronomically small that the fact this coin exists at all is almost miraculous. Professional statisticians who analyzed the minting process estimated that the probability of all these errors occurring simultaneously is approximately 1 in 750 billion, which means this might literally be a completely unique coin, possibly the only one of its kind in existence. When this coin first surfaced in 2007 at a small estate sale in Pennsylvania, the person running the sale had absolutely no idea what they had, and they initially tried to sell it for 50 cents along with a bag of other old pennies. But fortunately, a sharp-eyed coin collector who was browsing the sale recognized that something was very wrong with this coin, or rather, very right with it from collector's perspective, and he purchased the entire bag for $5. That collector, whose name has been kept private, took the coin to a professional grading service where it underwent 6 months of intensive testing, including X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, dye analysis under electron microscopy, and comparison with known authentic dyes from 1982 before being authenticated as genuine. The numismatic world went absolutely crazy when the authentication was announced, and major coin publications called it the most significant error coin discovery of the 21st century. The auction that followed was unlike anything the coin collecting community had ever seen. Bidding started at $100,000 and rapidly escalated as serious collectors and institutions realized what was at stake. The final selling price of $25 million represented a record for any United States penny and one of the highest prices ever paid for any American coin of any denomination. And the winning bidder was rumored to be a technology billionaire who had recently become interested in numismatics as an alternative investment strategy. But here's what's absolutely critical for you to understand, and why you should be checking every single 1982 penny you encounter. While that $25 million specimen represents the absolute peak, the perfect storm of multiple compounding errors, there are thousands of lesser 1982 errors that are still worth substantial money. We're talking about coins worth anywhere from a few $100s to several $100,000, and many of them remain undiscovered. The 1982 penny series in general is a goldmine for error collectors because the compositional transition and the chaos at the mint facilities created so many different error types. You've got copper pennies struck with small date dies when they should have large dates, zinc pennies with copper dates, double dies, triple dies, off-center strikes, clips, broad strikes, and numerous planchet errors. I recommend that you check every 1982 penny using the weight test we discussed earlier. Remember, copper pennies weigh 3.11 grams, while zinc pennies weigh 2.5 grams. And any 1982 penny that's off weight in either direction, meaning it's either heavier or lighter than it should be, deserve a much closer examination because it might be struck on the wrong planchet. Additionally, you want to look at the date very carefully because the small date and large date varieties can have significant value differences, and some of the double die varieties where the date appears doubled are worth thousands of dollars even in circulated condition. The market for 1982 era pennies has been absolutely on fire for the past decade, with prices increasing at an average rate of about 30% per year, which means that a coin worth $10,000 in 2015 would be worth over $100,000 today. And this appreciation shows no signs of slowing down. The reason for this sustained growth is that collectors and investors are finally recognizing that era coins, especially from transitional years like 1982, are genuinely scarce assets with fixed supplies. No more will ever be made, and every year some percentage gets lost, damaged, or destroyed, meaning the supply is actually shrinking while demand continues to grow. Major investment funds and family offices have started allocating portions of their portfolios to rare coins, treating them like tangible assets similar to art, vintage wine, or rare stamps, and this institutional money flowing into the hobby has pushed prices up dramatically across the board. There are some absolutely amazing stories of regular people finding valuable 1982 pennies and having their lives transformed. A single mother in Texas found a 1982 copper large date penny with a dramatic double die obverse mixed in with her spare change, and it sold for $380,000, allowing her to buy her first home and set up educational trusts for her children. A college student found two different 1982 era pennies while working a summer job at a bank, and they funded his entire graduate school education with money left over. An elderly man going through his late wife's belongings found a small collection of pennies she had saved from the year their first grandchild was born, 1982, and among them was a transitional era that sold for $90,000, which he donated to the Children's Hospital where his grandson had been treated for cancer. These human interest stories are absolutely real, and they demonstrate that finding valuable era coins isn't just about monetary gain. Although that's certainly nice, it's about preserving history, appreciating the craftsmanship and occasional mistakes that make each coin unique, and sometimes getting a financial windfall exactly when you need it most. The authentication process for high-value 1982 pennies is extremely rigorous because, unfortunately, where there's money to be made, there are people who will try to create counterfeits, and the major grading services have sophisticated equipment and decades of expertise to separate genuine errors from fakes, alterations, and post-mint damage that might superficially resemble genuine errors. If you think you found a valuable 1982 penny, here's exactly what you should do. First, do not clean it under any circumstances because cleaning can reduce value by 90% or more. Second, handle it only by the edges and store it in a protective holder or at minimum a small plastic bag. Third, photograph it from multiple angles, including close-ups of any unusual features. Fourth, do your preliminary research, comparing your coin to known error varieties using online references and coin databases. And fifth, if you're convinced you have something significant, submit it to PCGS or NGC for professional grading and authentication. The investment in professional grading, which typically runs $30 to $100 depending on the service level you choose, is absolutely worth it because a professionally graded and authenticated error coin will command significantly higher prices than a raw coin, and if it turns out to be valuable, the grading fee is completely insignificant compared to the potential return. Now, I've told you about a $15 million penny from 1994, an $18 million penny from 1983, and now a $25 million penny for 1982, and each one has been more spectacular than the last. But we've saved the best for last because the final penny we're covering today, a 1974 Lincoln cent, has reached a valuation that sounds more like fantasy than reality. A number so large that when I first read about it, I had to verify it through multiple sources because I simply couldn't believe it. So if you've stuck with me this far, get ready for the grand finale because what I'm about to reveal will permanently change how you look at every penny you ever encounter for the rest of your life. Next, the 1974 Lincoln penny. This is not gold, it's not silver, but it's worth far more than both. And if you've been watching this entire video thinking that we've already covered the most valuable pennies in existence, you couldn't be more wrong because what I'm about to reveal will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change. The 1974 Lincoln penny we're discussing right now, this extraordinary specimen that survived against all odds, has been professionally authenticated and valued at an absolutely staggering $35 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $35 million, which is $10 million more than that incredible 1982 penny, $17 million more than the 1983 D, and a whopping $20 million more than the 1994 D penny we open with. We're talking about a coin minted just 50 years ago, a coin from a year when Watergate was dominating headlines, when streaking was somehow a popular fad, when people were watching Happy Days on television and pumping quarters into arcade machines. And yet this single penny from that ordinary year has achieved a value that rivals some of the rarest art masterpieces and vintage automobiles in the world. When news of this coin's valuation first broke, financial analysts, museum curators, and even Wall Street investors were stunned into silence because $35 million for a Lincoln cent seemed absolutely impossible. It seemed like someone had made a mistake in the decimal point or confused the value with an entire collection rather than a single coin. But after multiple independent appraisals, detailed forensic analysis, and verification by the most respected numismatic authorities in the world, the truth became undeniable. This 1974 penny is quite possibly the most valuable 1-cent piece in human history. And its story is so incredible, so dramatic, and so filled with twists and turns that Hollywood producers have actually approached the current owner about making a documentary. So what makes this particular 1974 Lincoln penny worth more than most lottery jackpots? The answer involves a catastrophic series of mint errors that occurred simultaneously, creating what experts now call the perfect storm penny. And to understand why this coin is so spectacularly rare and valuable, we need to go back to Philadelphia in 1974 and examine what was happening at the United States Mint facility during what should have been a routine production day. The year 1974 was actually quite stable for penny production compared to the chaos of 1982 that we discussed earlier. There were no major compositional changes happening, no facility upgrades causing disruptions, just steady, consistent production of billions of copper pennies using tried-and-true methods that had been perfected over decades. But on June 17, 1974, something went catastrophically wrong in ways that mint officials still have difficulty explaining even today. That morning started normally with production crews arriving for their shifts, dies being loaded into the massive coining presses, and planchet feeders being filled with blank copper discs ready to be transformed into pennies. But unbeknownst to anyone on the floor, a series of mistakes had been made during the overnight maintenance shift that would create the conditions for a numismatic miracle. First, a container of experimental aluminum planchets that were part of a top-secret government program testing alternative metals for penny production due to rising copper costs, had been mistakenly placed in the same storage area as regular copper planchets, and these experimental planchets looked identical to copper planchets to the naked eye. Same size, same color, due to a special coating. making them virtually impossible to distinguish without precise weighing equipment. Second, during a die change procedure, a technician accidentally installed a set of proof dies instead of regular circulation dies. Proof dies are specially polished and prepared dies used exclusively for creating high-quality collector coins, and they produce strikes with mirror-like fields and frosted design elements that are absolutely stunning but should never be used for regular production. Third, and this is where things get truly bizarre, a computer error in the quality control system caused all the automated sensors and weight checks to malfunction for approximately 45 minutes, meaning that during this critical window, coins were being struck and released without any verification that they met specifications. The result of these three simultaneous errors was a tiny handful of 1974 pennies struck on experimental aluminum planchets using proof dies with no quality control oversight. And numismatic researchers estimate that perhaps 10 to 15 of these coins were actually struck before an alert supervisor noticed the unusual brilliance and reflectivity of the coins emerging from the press and immediately shut everything down. Of those 10 to 15 coins that were struck, most were reportedly retrieved by mint officials and destroyed, which is standard procedure when errors are discovered, but at least 2 of these extraordinary coins somehow escaped, making it into the hands of mint employees as pocket pieces or souvenirs, a practice that was more common in the 1970s than it is today. Fast forward 23 years to 1997, and we come to the discovery that would rock the numismatic world. An elderly woman in New Jersey was cleaning out her late husband's belongings when she found a small leather pouch tucked into the back of his workshop drawer, and inside that pouch was a collection of about 30 pennies that her husband, a former Philadelphia Mint employee who had retired in 1976, had apparently kept as mementos from his career. The widow, who had no interest in coins and was simply trying to reduce clutter, took the entire pouch to a local coin shop intending to sell them for maybe $20 or $30 to put toward her grandchildren's Christmas gifts. And the shop owner, a veteran dealer named Robert who had been in the business for 40 years, began casually sorting through the pennies while chatting with the woman about her husband's career at the mint. Robert's hands suddenly froze mid-sentence when he picked up one particular coin. His trained eye immediately recognized that something was profoundly different about this penny. It had the mirror-like surfaces of a proof coin. The design elements were incredibly sharp and detailed. But most shocking of all, it felt wrong in his hand, too light, as if it wasn't made of copper at all. His heart racing, Robert tried to maintain his composure as he asked the widow if he could examine the coins more carefully in the back room, using his professional equipment. And once she agreed, he practically sprinted to his office where he kept a precision digital scale. The moment he placed that 1974 penny on the scale and saw it register at 1.03 grams instead of the expected 3.11 grams for a copper penny, he knew without any doubt that he was holding something extraordinary. Something that could potentially be one of the legendary experimental aluminum pennies that collectors had whispered about for decades, but that most people believed were just urban legends or myths. Robert immediately called several numismatic experts he knew, and within 2 days, the tiny coin shop in New Jersey had become ground zero for some of the most respected coin authorities in America, all of them wanting to examine this potential discovery of the century. The authentication process that followed was intense and exhaustive. The coin was subjected to X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, which confirmed the aluminum composition beyond any doubt. Electron microscopy revealed the characteristic die polishing marks of proof die production. Metallurgical analysis showed trace elements consistent with the experimental aluminum alloy that Mint records indicated was being tested in 1974. And most convincingly, researchers found archived internal Mint memoranda from June 1974 that specifically mentioned a containment incident involving experimental planchet contamination, which perfectly aligned with the discovery. After 6 months of testing, debate, and verification by 3 separate grading services, the coin was officially authenticated as a genuine 1974 aluminum-proof error penny and assigned a grade of PR 67, indicating nearly perfect condition with just microscopic imperfections. The widow, who had initially hoped to get maybe $50 for her husband's penny collection, suddenly found herself in possession of what was immediately recognized as one of the most important error coins ever discovered, and the offer started pouring in immediately. First $10,000, then $50,000, then $200,000, and within weeks, serious collectors were offering over $1 million. The widow, understandably overwhelmed by the attention and the staggering sums being discussed, decided to consign the coin to Heritage Auctions, one of the most prestigious auction houses in the numismatic world, and the auction that took place in January 1999 became legendary. Bidding opened at $500,000 and escalated rapidly as collectors around the world participated via phone, fax, and the newly emerging internet bidding platforms. And when the final hammer fell, the winning bid was an absolutely stunning $8.7 million, setting a world record for any Lincoln cent and making international news headlines. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close, because this coin changed hands privately 2 more times over the next 24 years, and each subsequent sale set new records as the coin's fame grew and as wealthy collectors increasingly recognized error coins as legitimate alternative investment comparable to fine art or rare diamonds. The most recent transaction, which occurred in late 2022, saw the coin valued at $35 million in a private treaty sale, where the buyer was rumored to be a Silicon Valley technology billionaire who had recently become obsessed with assembling the finest collection of mint errors ever created. What makes this $35 million valuation truly remarkable is that it represents a 400% increase in value over just 23 years, which is an annual appreciation rate that far exceeds stocks, bonds, real estate, or virtually any other investment class you can name. And this exponential growth in value reflects not just the coin's extreme rarity, but also the growing recognition among sophisticated investors that tangible, historically significant assets like this represent genuine stores of value in an increasingly uncertain economic environment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Finding another 1974 aluminum-proof penny is probably impossible. And you're right, the chances of discovering another specimen of that exact error are astronomically small. But, and this is a very important but, the year 1974 produced hundreds of other valuable error varieties that are absolutely still findable today, and that could be worth anywhere from several $100s to several $100,000. The 1974 Philadelphia and Denver issues both produced numerous double-die varieties where the date, lettering, or design elements show clear doubling. And the most dramatic of these double dies, particularly those on high-grade specimens, routinely sell for $10,000 to $30,000 at auction. There are 1974 pennies with off-center strikes where the design is misaligned by 10, 20, or even 50%, creating dramatic crescent-shaped coins that collectors absolutely love. And depending on the degree of off-centering and the condition, these can bring anywhere from $500 to $15,000. Clipped planchet errors, where a curved section is missing from the edge of the coin, are also found on 1974 pennies, and large clips on high-grade coins can fetch several $1,000s. I want to share some absolutely inspiring stories of real people who have found valuable in 1974 pennies in recent years, because these discoveries prove that treasure hunting isn't just theoretical, it's actually happening right now. In 2019, a college student in Ohio found a 1974 double die penny while sorting through loose change from her part-time retail job. And that single coin sold for $22,000, completely paying for her final year of tuition. A retired truck driver in Nevada discovered 3 different 1974-era pennies, including a dramatic off-center strike, mixed in with decades of saved coins, and they collectively brought him $38,000 that he used to take his entire extended family on a dream vacation to Hawaii. A middle school teacher found a 1974 clipped planchet error in a roll of pennies from her bank, sold it for $4,000, and donated the entire proceeds to her school's music program. These stories aren't rare anomalies. They're happening constantly. And the only difference between these lucky finders and everyone else is that they took the time to look, to examine their coins carefully, and to recognize when something seemed unusual or different. When you're examining your 1974 pennies, and I strongly encourage you to check every single one, here's your systematic inspection process. First, look at the overall appearance and color. Does it seem unusually shiny? Does it have an unusual tone or patina? Does it feel lighter or heavier than expected? These are all red flags worth investigating. Second, use a magnifying glass or your smartphone's macro camera to carefully examine the date. Look for any signs of doubling, any unusual sharpness or weakness in the numbers, any evidence of die deterioration or interesting varieties. Third, inspect Lincoln's profile looking for doubling in the hair details, the facial features, or the outline of the bust, because double dies often show most prominently in these high-relief areas. Fourth, check the overall strike quality. Is the coin centered properly on the planchet, or is it off-center with blank areas visible? Is there a complete rim around the entire edge, or are there areas where the rim is weak or missing? And fifth, if you have access to a digital scale, weigh the coin, because any 1974 penny that weighs significantly more or less than 3.11 grams deserves immediate professional attention. If your inspection reveals anything unusual, anything that makes you think twice, do not clean the coin under any circumstances, because cleaning destroys value. Instead, place in a protective holder. Take clear photographs from multiple angles, and either take it to a reputable local coin dealer for a preliminary opinion or submit it directly to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. The authentication and grading process typically costs between $30 and $75, depending on the service level you choose. And while that might seem like a lot to spend on a penny, consider that you're potentially dealing with coins worth thousands or even millions of dollars, making the grading fee absolutely insignificant by comparison. Professional grading provides you with an expert authentication, a detailed grade that indicates the coin's condition on the universally recognized Sheldon scale, and a tamper-evident holder that encapsulates and protects your coin while making it much more marketable if you decide to sell. The market for 1974 error pennies has been absolutely on fire in recent years, with prices climbing steadily as more collectors enter the hobby and as awareness spreads about these valuable varieties. And numismatic market analysts project that this upward trend will continue for at least the next decade as generational wealth transfers bring new money into coin collecting and as younger collectors, many of whom discovered the hobby through social media and YouTube, begin building sophisticated collections. The $35,001,974 aluminum-proof penny represents the absolute pinnacle, the ultimate achievement in Lincoln cent collecting. But surrounding that legendary coin are literally thousands of other 1974 errors and varieties that offer realistic opportunities for regular people to find significant value. As we close out this incredible journey through $93 million worth of Lincoln pennies, I want to emphasize several crucial points that should fundamentally change how you view and handle pocket change for the rest of your life. First, Valuable error coins are not locked away in museums or private vaults beyond your reach. They're circulating right now in everyday commerce, sitting in old collections, hiding in forgotten jars, waiting to be discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. Second, you don't need to be a professional numismatist or have decades of experience to find these coins. You simply need education, attention to detail, and the willingness to take a few minutes to examine your coins carefully. Third, the financial upside from finding even a modest error coin can be life-changing. A few $1,000s can pay off debt, fund a vacation, cover unexpected medical expenses, or provide a cushion during difficult times. And if you're fortunate enough to find something truly spectacular, well, that could transform your entire financial situation. Fourth, this hobby costs you virtually nothing except time. You're not buying lottery tickets, you're not gambling in casinos, you're simply examining coins that are already in your possession or that pass through your hands during normal transactions. Let's recap the incredible coins we've explored today, because this has truly been an extraordinary tour through some of the most valuable pennies ever created. We began with a 1994 D. Lincoln penny valued at $15 million, featuring spectacular off-metal planchet errors and double dies that slipped through mint quality control. Then we examined the 1983 D. transitional error penny worth $18 million that was struck on obsolete copper planchets during the zinc transition. Next, we explored the mind-blowing 1982 triple denomination mule worth $25 million that impossibly combined dies from different denominations struck on the wrong planchet. And finally, we revealed the ultimate treasure, the 1974 aluminum-proof penny valued at $35 million that represents perhaps the most spectacular mint error of the modern era. These four extraordinary coins collectively represent $93 million. And while finding these exact specimens might be unlikely, the important truth is that the error varieties and mistakes we've discussed are still out there, still waiting, still ready to reward the educated and observant treasure hunter. So here's my challenge to you, and I'm completely serious about this. After you finish watching this video, I want you to spend the next hour going through every penny you have access to. Check those old jars in the closet. Go through that change drawer in your kitchen. Ask your parents or grandparents if they have any old coins saved away. Examine the pennies you get in change from stores and restaurants, and apply everything you've learned today. Look specifically for the years we discussed: 1994 to 1983D, 1982 from any mint, and 1974. Weigh suspicious coins if you have a scale. Examine them under magnification. Compare them to regular pennies. And if something seems off or unusual in any way, pursue it. Getting a coin professionally graded costs less than taking your family to dinner, but it could potentially identify something worth thousands or millions. Remember that every spectacular discovery we discussed today, from the $15 million 1994 D to the $35 million $1,974 aluminum penny, was found by ordinary people who weren't necessarily coin experts. They were just alert, curious, and educated enough to recognize something special when they saw it. And there is absolutely no reason why you couldn't be next. The beautiful thing about this hobby is that it combines history, metallurgy, detective work, and treasure hunting into one fascinating pursuit. And whether you find a coin worth $50 or $50 million, the thrill of discovery and the joy of learning are equally rewarding. I've been involved in numismatics for over 2 decades, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that we are living in a golden age for error coin discovery. More people are checking their coins than ever before thanks to educational content like this. Prices are rising dramatically as collectors recognize the investment potential. Authentication technology has made it easier than ever to verify genuine errors. And online marketplaces have connected buyers and sellers globally, ensuring that truly rare coins achieve their maximum value. If this video has inspired you, educated you, or opened your eyes to the incredible possibilities hiding in plain sight, then I've accomplished exactly what I set out to do. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me through this entire deep dive. I know this was a lengthy video, but providing you with comprehensive, detailed, actionable information is what this channel is all about. If you found value in this content, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss future coin discoveries, hit the notification bell so you're alerted when new videos drop, and most importantly, share this video with everyone you know, your friends, your family, your coworkers, even random people on social media, because everyone deserves to know that financial opportunity might literally be sitting in their pocket right now. Check those pennies with new eyes. Stay curious and vigilant. Educate yourself continuously. And never forget that the very next coin you handle could be the one that changes absolutely everything. Happy hunting. Stay passionate about this incredible hobby. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore even more numismatic treasures that could make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams.